Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of congregational humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. Thank you for joining us.
So our wisdom moment is going to be a video. I didn't bring popcorn, but I do hope that you'll still be able to gift your undivided attention. The video that follows is a compilation of interviews I conducted last summer with members of the First Unitarian Society community, each of whom has been part of this congregation for more than 30 years. So together, all of these interviews carry this extraordinary wealth of memory, wisdom, love for this place, tiny little stories here and there, and it was a privilege to get to absorb all of the lovely details in on these interviews. It's easy to walk into a place like this and imagine that its buildings, traditions, ways of being have always existed just as they are. But in this place, every ritual, every decision, every relationship has been shaped by generations of people asking what kind of community they wanted to become. So my hope is that these stories can offer a tiny little glimpse of the kind of care, imagination, and deep commitment that have made this FUS community what it is today. We're rolling? We're rolling.
Okay.
Yeah. So, this is an interview with Wendy Jerome, Carol Barkley, Carol Kemp, Bruce Nelson, and Barb Watson.
Well, I think maybe we shouldn't wait any longer.
As a part of First Unitarian Society's Oral History Project.
It was pretty simple and straightforward. May we have eyes that see, hearts that love, and hands that are ready to serve.
We have always sort of been seen as the flagship of the religious humanist group.
FUS was definitely the place for us. My mother said, that's just like Farmers Union. That isn't religion.
Like a lot of things happen when you go to college, and the world opens up to you, and you're like, oh, there's another way of doing things, and this makes more sense.
What did the Unitarian Universalist humanist community open up for you?
In the church that I was in, the Methodist Church in Fair Lake, they asked me to make a talk one Sunday about how my League of Women Voters activities lent themselves toward doing work for God. Mm-hmm. And I did that, and but how you related to your religion was really set by you, not set by somebody else telling you what you should. So I came to UUism and humanist points of view fairly easy.
It was about that time that I joined First Unitarian Society, which was a real treat because it was such a thriving congregation.
Unitarianism is such a healthy way to live. It's like the difference of do you want to be in a room with oxygen or do you want to be in a room without oxygen? I want to be in a room with oxygen.
It was like a breath of fresh air because I'm a scientist and I couldn't take that stuff anymore.
And Mr. Bollinger, when we were studying Akhenaten, Child of the Sun, let us make a mummy in our class. And we brought in torn up sheets and we made a whole mummy while he read to us about Akhenaten. And we had a whole Egyptian procession and burial ceremony for the rest of the religious education program. It's great. Wow. Yeah.
Religious education program was a 2-hour program starting at 9:30. Huge classroom wing. In fact, they expanded the classroom wing in 1960. Many, many more kids. I don't know, 40 or 50 or 60 kids.
Sundays were the best because I'm a baby boomer and here I am in a public school classroom with 36 kids and one teacher, poor teacher. And I come to Sunday school here And the teachers want me to ask questions. It's amazing. They want me to ask questions. And they let us do art, and we have microscopes to study pond water and see origins of life.
What?
It was fabulous. I knew all kinds of stuff.
And then we'd talk about how to get along with bullies.
How to get along.
With bullies,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, behave yourself, in other words.
No, be friendly.
Oh, friendly, oh, okay.
Right.
The only thing that was a little haunting was I kind of thought that we weren't allowed to believe in God because, you had that too? Because we had come-outers, people who had joined the church late and had been very much abused by their religious upbringing. And they were adamant and violent. You couldn't say words like sanctuary. It has to be the upper assembly, you know. And you can't, oh my God, you can't say narthex. Narthex is a bad word. I was always interested in religion, but I thought, you know, I can't get into that because, you know, it's poisonous. It hurts me a little bit that I'm not allowed to believe in something. And I really want to believe in something. Maybe it's the human spirit I believe in. But a friend was in his philosophy course reading I and Thou by Martin Buber, and that was my breakthrough book. And okay, this connects it. I can have optimism and be a Unitarian Universalist.
What do you think the helping containers were for coming up with your own belief system throughout the years here at FUS?
Community action's important to me.
It's that kinship. And whether we want to say it's because we're focusing on what we're worshiping or not, I think it's the kinship that really holds communities together.
It's amazing how people bond when they are given an opportunity to talk to each other.
We had wine tasting, we had lean cuisine.
Knitting group,
Classical music.
Yeah, classical music.
lots of good music. I became involved with the choir.
Circle suppers I especially remember.
Zip code groups were also kind of designed that you got to know people that lived around you. So if you needed a ride to the society, or you needed groceries, or you wanted to get together for a cookout on Friday night, something, you have a few people you could just call over.
For a few years in the early 2000s, they had secret friend members, whether they had children or not, could offer your name and they'd link you to a child, and then you would exchange messages with them.
The kinship gives each individual a sense of mattering. You know, you matter. If you don't show up on Sunday, I'm not gonna bring chicken soup to your house. You know, and when people know they matter, they pull it together. Most of the congregation are and have always been interested in, hey, what can we do to make the world better? As a congregation, what social action projects can we take on?
You can tell a story. You used to go to protests.
Whenever there was one organized, I'd be there.
I remember.
Finally, one time, you went with me.
Well, you asked me, because you would make a little sign or something, and this guy said, have you ever considered or thought about being Santa Claus? I said, no. Why? He said, well, look in today's Strib paper, the front page showed me waving this sign.
We're on our fifth refugee family that we're settling, and we're, oh my God, the congregation is all in on that. You know, you make the announcement, we need to furnish an apartment for them, and all the stuff is there within a week, you know.
Let's give an effort to aligning all the resources that are available. Look, resources from the legislature, resources from advocacy groups, resources from congregations. Let's align all our efforts to ending this problem.
I lead a neighborhood group that protests over the highway once a week, and we've done it since May. And I'm always bringing cookies, and I'm always calling these people up and saying, hey, come on, we're going to have a great time Wednesday. A. Paul Davies in one of his prayers says something about this. Let me not, extinguish the light within myself which helps others to live. You would say it yourself. Nothing feels better than knowing you've actually helped. It's better than ice cream. I was growing up, our minister was Carl Storm, and Carl Storm's sermons were lectures. And my mother was taking notes. My father was taking notes, and they always had a sermon discussion in the car on the way home from church.
This is Carl Storm. My subject this morning is the natural superiority of women, but men and women are different in some very essential ways. Then they pour forth into the world cultural influences that are not always alike. But the world is a richer for it, and it would be richer still if men and women were to become full and respected colleagues, not just in the home, but also in the larger world, which is likewise their home.
Our minister, Bob Lehman, had the congregation didn't know it, but he was supporting Vietnam draft resistors.
Very active, very anti-war, really great guy.
And he had a support group for gays.
He used to say, if he referred to God, he referred to God if there is one.
He preached being against the Vietnam War, and that upset a lot of people. His preaching was, hey, let's rethink what we're doing in Southeast Asia. Is this really true? Does communism have a history of domino theory? What do we know about the way Pentagon collects its statistics? He did good stuff. Blessed, here I am saying blessed. See, I can say blessed because I'm a Unitarian. I didn't say blessed.
We had forums in the morning before the regular service.
We had forum programs every Sunday throughout the year, maybe from the mid-90s until about 2010.
What, in your perspective, did forums bring to the FUS community that a normal assembly just didn't?
Bringing in a speaker with a different point of view.
We invited people that could talk about issues of the day.
To be able to challenge and therefore refine and improve our own perspectives and the perspectives of First Unitarian Society members. The particular interest of mine is to bring contrasting viewpoints.
As years went on, there were tensions between what went on downstairs in the forums and what was supposed to go on upstairs in the upper assembly. So the forums would go on and the speakers would be good and they would get people talking, and it became difficult for people to leave that environment where they were talking and discussing and involved, to then leave downstairs and go upstairs where you were supposed to be quiet and attentive and be part of a more spiritual service. I like to describe myself as a humanist Unitarian. I think, when you say you're a Unitarian Universalist, that can be kind of off-putting. Like immediately you identify yourself as being different than the person you're talking with. I'm meeting people here where I'm living in a senior community. What I'm experimenting with is to identify myself as being a humanist Unitarian. And so Catholics that I meet, Lutherans that I meet, they're humanists too. They're on an interpersonal level. It's more of a collaborative word.
Remembering kind of the history of FUS, what are your hopes for the future of FUS, and what do you hope that FUS doesn't forget, I guess, about its history or its core values?
Continue being a very liberal Christian religion. Not Christian, just liberal religion, yes.
Yeah. I would like them to continue to have open doors to people from various walks of life.
It's work to be optimistic. But if I'm not helping others to feel grounded and move ahead, I'm letting the idiots, the nebbishes, I'm letting the nebbishes run the program. That's, hey, I only have one life. I better do this right.
So I want to thank y'all for sitting through that 13-minute video. I think when I went through each detail, it just felt so hard to take any of those out. And I thought, to whoever takes in certain details and whoever doesn't, whatever it is, I thought it was just really all valuable. So when I spent last summer interviewing these longtime members of FUS, my project, I thought, was to collect history. So I thought I was going to hear dates or ministers or building campaigns or arguments or milestones, and I certainly did. But after a while, I realized people weren't actually telling me the history of this congregation. They were giving me a little memory tour, and not necessarily the kind that you find in a museum or even in this building, but of all the little places where life slowly became intertwined with the community. Someone recounts sitting in the back of the car as their parents are exchanging notes after a Carl Storm sermon. Someone's recounting this impossibly tempting buzz of conversation after a forum when they have to quiet themselves for service. Someone remembers the tiny little adventures they went on in their religious education program almost 60 years ago. Not because they could recall the curriculum necessarily, but because there was a mummy wrapped in old bed sheets that may have terrified or delighted them as a kid. And that detail has absolutely nothing to do with UU theology, right? And somehow, it also has everything to do with it. Here's the strange thing I kept noticing. And some of this is included in these interviews, and some of them I left out. But whenever I asked somebody what they believed, their answers wandered. I don't really know. I've changed my mind. I wouldn't put it that way. I don't believe what I used to, or even, I guess I'm just more hopeful than anything. With each of these interviews, you could just trace this shifting theology in people. It stretched. Sometimes it contradicted itself. But whenever I asked folks where they belonged, there was no hesitation. Oh, obviously, this place. And I found that a bit odd when I started to really think about it. I mean, most religious traditions begin with a shared belief, right? Believe this, confess this, recite this, spray this over people, whatever. Then perhaps you belong. And the UUs, perhaps, have often done something almost backwards. We've gathered people who disagree about nearly everything ultimate, and somehow asked them to build a community anyways. It's ridiculous, it's amazing. So for well over a century, people have wondered whether that could actually work. There's an early 20th century UU minister who asked a question in what was known at the time as the Christian Register, which was a popular liberal religion magazine at the time. And it says, if religion is simply a private matter, then why bother coming to church at all? And it's a fair question, right? If we don't all share the same creed, what exactly is holding us together? And after conducting these interviews, I don't really think the answer was ideas. I think the answer was something to do with material, with matter, with the wood and the stone and the sunlight and the friendship bracelets that Lena just made me, and the coffee and the bell and the chicken soup that you get for showing up, right? The hallway where you met your closest friend. The assembly hall where your child sang with a group of people for the first time. The chair where you cried after a loved one died. Communities are never held together by ideas alone. They're held together by places where ideas have to become embodied. And obviously that is true long before it became true of churches. I mean, think about your childhood home. Maybe you couldn't tell me what the wallpaper was on the walls, and you probably don't remember every meal, but your body does remember things, right? The creak of the stairs, maybe the smell after the rain, the way the afternoon light may have landed on a particular room. Places like this one teach us long before they explain themselves. Poet Wendell Berry once wrote that we can only care for what we have learned to love. And usually we learn to love things physically before we ever really be able to understand them intellectually, right? Perhaps churches work the same way. We imagine that conviction or faith, or whatever you want to call it, begins with answers. But my theory is that it actually begins with architecture. Not because this building is necessarily sacred in itself, but because I think buildings quietly teach us how to become sacred together, week after week, year after year. And you saw in Wendy's interview that she believed she wasn't allowed to believe in God as a Unitarian. And years later, she discovered that wasn't true at all. And what changed? Not the building, not the community. She is the one who changed. And the community was spacious enough not only to let her back in after this discovery, but to learn from it and absorb it into its collective identity. And I find that really, really remarkable about this place. Most institutions ask our beliefs to remain the same so that it can remain stable. Healthy communities somehow manage the opposite. They remain stable precisely because they allow people to change. And maybe that's the real miracle of Unitarian Universalism. Not that we've figured out what to believe, but that we've learned how to keep sitting beside people while they're figuring it all out. So the building becomes less like a monument and more like a shoreline. People arrive, people leave, children become elders, certainties become questions, questions become wisdom, and the water is never the same. Yet somehow, the shore remains. And how exciting for us as seekers after truth and justice that we never have to be right about those answers, ever, in order to belong to a community. Our questions get to be these tiny little invitations into people's heart. But I want to return to this question. What then is the glue holding this belonging together, aside from love itself? I would like to think of these interviews as recorded evidence that belonging also resides in materials. It lives in bells and libraries and assembly halls and worn staircases and laughter echoing through its chambers and generations of hands touching the same hymnals and railings. Perhaps the materials that make up this space are like absorbing us. Perhaps every person who walks through these doors leaves behind little crumbs of courage or welcome or thirst for truth that forms an invisible film on everything we touch. Until one day, a new person walks in wondering whether they belong, and without anyone explaining exactly why, their body somehow knows that they've been here before. Not because they've visited this building necessarily, but because human beings have always been building places where strangers slowly become neighbors. And maybe that's one of the holiest things we ever get to do.
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.